Welcome back, everybody. This is John Dupuy, and I'm here again with Douglas Prater for the fourth episode of Meditate on This. And it is Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day, all you lovers and sweethearts out there. And we are ready to roll. Okay, so here we are, and doing one of the things we love to do best is just working on out issues through dialogue and conversation and trying to figure these things out and comparing notes and seeing what emerges in the context, in the container of our conversations. So today Doug had put the question, well, what are we going to converse about next time? And it came to me, I think it was this morning when I was in the gym, motivation. What an interesting topic that is. And basically the pusto, that's an existential academic word for where one stands. And where we stand, Doug and I, is we stand for integral practice. In other words, working the body, the mind, the emotions / shadow, and the spiritual practice in order to become the kind of men or the kind of persons that we need to be. And it takes a lot of work, and it's very challenging, and it's not just one thing, it's multiple things. So how do we become motivated, and what does motivation mean at different levels of development or different types? Is a masculine motivation different from a feminine motivation? I refer to the Enneagram a lot. Is the motivation of a 1 different from the motivation of a 6, which I am a 6 type? So anyway, this is a complex deal, but I think it's essential, because if we don't figure out what we're supposed to be doing and motivate and how to get there, we live lives that are filled with despair and dissatisfaction and depression and cynicism and all kinds of things that are not necessary and very painful. So, hi, Doug.
Yeah, hi, John. It's a great topic as always, and I was thinking about the title for this episode when you came to me with the suggestion, and it really begs the question of why bother, as you put it. Is the motivation does our motivation change as we go through life and at different stages of life and at different levels of our personal evolution? Is it different based on our personality types? And then, of course, there's the question of what is our larger purpose, our larger driving reason for doing what we do, for committing to this difficult integral practice that we do every day and that we encourage others to join in and partake in and continue to do every day for their growth and development and whatever. But why bother? Why is it worth it? And then there is finding that motivation in the moment, to wake up early when you don't want to wake up early, to go to the gym when you don't feel like exercising, to persist with doing difficult work when you don't feel like doing difficult work. When you're a struggling musician, why continue to produce your art, to continue to create songs? What drives you there? Or when you're feeling too tired to pick up the guitar, you have too many other things on your plate, what is going to get you through to continue to do that? And certainly it can be difficult to find in the moment. We think about the 4 quadrants in our in the upper right quadrant, our physical bodies, our neurophysiology are going to scream at us that we're tired, that we're sad, that we're not feeling good, that we're too angry to do a thing today. And how do we overcome that and drop into our practice anyway? So I think it's a fantastic topic for us to explore today, John. There's so much richness here that we can cover.
Yeah, awesome. And by the way, I was looking at my face, and the light was changing. I was going, wow, it's just like an LSD flashback that's beginning to happen. Then I realized, oh, it's natural light. So the clouds and the things are changing. So my face kind of zooms in, and you may be having a flashback, but it's not necessarily what's happening here. So yeah, the motivation. I've been listening, and I downloaded the book by David Goggins that we talked about last time, I think. And of course, he's like this motivation genius. Goggins. And he's really, really big on the internet right now, and has this huge book that's really influencing lots of people to get motivated and to push through their barriers and not and take um, their deficits and to make them their strengths. And of course, we've Doug and I have both worked with uh, in the field of recovery from addiction, and of course, in the recovery field, one of my little truisms is your deficits, being an addict and all the awful things you do, can become your assets if you push through it, if you work through it, if you accept, the shame, the blame, the pain, and all of that. And you come through on the other end a transformed person who is very different from the drug craving, psychotic sociopath that a drug addict is, or an alcoholic in the latter stages, progressions of the disease. So that's just one way that I've dealt with it. And of course, with Goggins, David Goggins, he came, it's like that movie. What was it? Anyway, he was a poor black kid with a really violent, awful father and severe learning disorders, and just did really poorly in high school, and just was barely maintaining, and he
unbelievable racism in his small town.
Right. He was like the only black kid in his school, and they took it out on him, and he got to be 300 pounds, and he was spraying for cockroaches, and that was making $1,000 a month, and he said, nah, somehow. So he looked at the mirror and said, no, this is not going to happen. And he joined the military to become a Navy SEAL, and on and on and on and on. And he just learned how to just not take his limitations as a barrier for who he could be, and push through everything. He said he was one of his examples. He was studying this diving manual so he could go to the under frogman training and the SEALs. And he wrote out every page longhand like 10 times in the manual, and then memorized the whole damn book, because he said, man, I'm really stupid. He said, I'm stupid, and it's like, says, if you're fat, admit you're fat. If you're stupid, if you're this or that, and you just have to face it. And then you have to do whatever you have to do to overcome that. And one of his things is nobody will ever outwork me.
Yeah.
And I was like, nice. And, in my story, I had, good parents. And, we were definitely upper middle class, and, I traveled, and we lived in Mexico, and I experienced a lot of good stuff, but I basically threw it in the trash can, dropped out of school when I was 14 and joined a religious cult. And I can tell you all about cults, but anyway, so I was in that for about 8 years, and ended up just in my early 20s with no high school education, and 2 kids and a wife, and a head full of stuff that I didn't believe any longer, and filled with just shame about what an idiot I was, and how could I, fallen for that, the whole thing. Anyway, very confused and very, very spiritually confused. And so I said, well, I got to do something. What can I do? And I was off in the island of the Mediterranean, like contemplating my future, which looked pretty bleak. So I arranged a repatriation loan. So for all you hippies out there, if you get stuck in a foreign country, you can go to the consulate, at least you could, and borrow money to get home, which we did. And the day after I got back, I think we got back to Colorado Springs, I went and joined the Army. So I was like, okay, this is what, my family always did. There's this tradition of military service. So I said, okay. And a lot of people that leave cults, and cults is like, a lot of ways is like an addiction. It happened to my brother. He left for a few years and was actually really successful in what he was doing. But the call of the cult just, drug him back in, as De Niro said, right? And I wanted to make sure that I burned my bridges behind me, and that I was not going to be able to, wimp out and go back, because the only thing I know how to do is be in a cult. Right. So, and I could imagine myself, drill sergeant, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, but I really think I need to get back to my cult. Yeah. I can imagine what kind of, I don't think that would have been acceptable. As it turned out, nary once did I look back or miss it. I really learned a lot of powerful life lessons, which I'm still drawing on, because again, as Goggins would say, your mistakes, falling flat on your face is one of the great teachers. And I felt I had really fallen on my face big time. And so I was very motivated not to be a fuck up anymore. Okay. I wanted to be a good soldier. It's all I had going for me. All right. So I went through basic. It was in Anniston, Alabama at the time. And, you go through this 12-week basic training thing. And then with no break, you get the same damn drill sergeants and they start MP school the last day of basic. So we were there, God, a long time, 20 weeks to get through all this stuff. And I was just like, I'm going to be there, do it. And, I was like, wow, it's pretty good, And I'd never been a good student in school. I think I was too ADHD, but I used to skip school and go to libraries and read all day. And somehow there was a little library next to where I lived in Houston, and they didn't seem to mind. They didn't call the truant officer or anything. I just go and read books. And but I was not a very good student. And earlier than that, I'd been in the special ed classes, and it's just like couldn't wrap my head around the educational system. Did really well in history. But anyway, all that to say, I didn't have a great foundation of that. And so I became a really good soldier, and I managed to get myself a slot at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, where they sent me to 10 months of German training. And German as a second language, it ain't easy, folks. The grammar is just terrible. There's 16 ways to say the. Can you imagine? It's just awful. You've got, it's like in Spanish, you have masculine and feminine. In German, you have masculine, feminine, and neuter, and it changes if it's plural, and it changes if it's a subject, and it changes if it's a direct object, and it changes if it's the indirect object, and it changes if it's generative, shows possession, like John's car. It's just awful. So you sit there, and just to get through a sentence, just to say the correctly, is like, huh? So anyway, it was very challenging, and that's like a 40% dropout rate. And I got through it because I really needed to get through it. I could not, I said in my hand, I cannot fuck up again. I have to start building some success in my life and, be a good soldier, be a good military policeman. So I was trained to do, be a good investigator. That's why they're teaching me German. So I'd go work with the German investigators over there. Anyway, all those things began to build a foundation of, wow, I'm not as big an idiot as maybe I seem. And if I try really hard, I can do more than I ever thought I could do. So that's kind of that was my initial motivation, feeling great shame for having, spent most of my adolescence in a cult. The good thing is I stayed off of drugs for those years. It was, in some ways, it was because I was headed down that particular road, and that put a habeas stopus on that one. So that was what initially gave me my taste and my understanding of what I need, where my motivation was coming into to as I moved into adulthood, through young adulthood.
Yeah, that's a shame, and self-loathing can be a powerful motivator, at least in the early stages of transformation. There's a movie, one of my favorite movies, called Vanilla Sky, came out, I think, in the early 2000s. And it's this kind of bizarre, strange trip that asks a lot of interesting questions. But one of the refrains that they repeat several times during that movie is that every passing moment is another chance to turn it all around. And that really sticks with me. It's like, no matter how far we've fallen, no matter how deep down in that black hole we've gone, we can, with the right motivation, pull ourselves out of it and do the hard work that's necessary. John, in addition to that pain and shame, you had found something else that was motivating you, which is a need that was filled by both of those things. The need not to go back to the cult. Well, you were in that filled a need for you too. When you came out of it, you had to find another way to fill that need, which you did, and it pushed you to do the hard things and the hard work and push beyond studying an insanely difficult language. I can't even imagine what that must have been like trying to learn as an adult. But, lo and behold, you did it because you had that deep motivation inside you not to go back to where you were. When I was recovering from alcoholism, and, one is never truly fully recovered. It's an ongoing process of maintenance to keep doing that work. But uh, there were so many times in that black hole where I just, why bother? And everything is so far gone. I'm never going to get this back. I'm never going to get figured out, and the world would be better off without me. But I kept trying anyway. It is truly never too late. Once you find that spark inside, that reason you never want to go back to it. Certainly there's a lot of work involved in finding that and learning to listen to it. And then the work, the deeper you go, the harder it is to get out as well. You were talking earlier, John, about yourself and about David Goggins. You reminded me of another really good quote. I don't have the exact wording, but Will Smith talks a lot about motivation. He says, look, I'm not the most talented guy out there. I'm not the best actor in the world. I don't have all these other things going for me, but what I do have is that I will outwork anyone. He says, I know one thing. You put me on a treadmill next to somebody and they're getting off first. I may die up here while I'm running, but they're getting off first, or that's the end. And that kind of drive, that work ethic, not only can be an incredibly valuable tool in doing the difficult things and difficult work that we want to do with our lives, but also in finding that within ourselves and pulling ourselves up from where we are to where we want to be. It requires, though, a strong enough why and a sufficient internal motivation to do so. And that changes over time. You know, one of my strongest motivators these days is to, first of all, take care of my family. And secondly, to contribute to the world. There was a time 20 years ago when I was motivated by those nihilistic, narcissistic ideas of my generation, which were, you know, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want these things, I want big success and all this crap. And over time, you learn that those are not the things that are truly important. You learn that. So you start with a motivation somewhere at one level, or at least I did. And through the process of doing the work that I thought was going to take me there, I ended up learning a valuable lesson about other things that are truly important and that motivate me today, that created the life that is different and will continue, hopefully, to evolve as practice continues and life goes on. And there was a time when I thought I was not going to make it. And how did I get out and find the motivation to do that when it felt like there was no hope? And
How did you?
You know, the only thing that I can say is that there was somewhere inside me, in spite of the hopelessness, there was some little spark that just refused to die. And I remember laying there in bed, hoping that I was not going to wake up in the morning, and then a shift and something leapt out and grabbed hold of me and started talking to me and said, no, not tonight. One more time, one more night. You can live, you can do this, you can try again. Mm-hmm. And I got up and I did. And of course, the next couple of days were a real hard detox, one of a series of them. But I held on to that. I held on to that spark, and it motivated me to take the first steps and start doing a thing. And the integral practice that you and I both do today, John, you know, we don't do the exact same things in our integral practice, but it's the same foundational principles that we apply to designing our own.
Right. And our practice evolves and changes over time. You know, I'm not exactly doing the same workout that I was doing 10 years ago or the same meditation. You know, it does evolve. You know, you establish the practice and the practice establishes you. And then, you know, there's just it's a self-informing system. Anyway, the more you learn, and you can just adapt it, and it grows, and it's a growing, living, moving, evolving.
And practice. You start from wherever you are, too. Sure. You know, coming up from the place that I was in the depths of alcoholism and going through direct, my body was in terrible shape. My brain was in terrible shape. It was really hard to do anything but taking the first few steps to start walking just around the block outside, getting out in the fresh air and allowing the neighbors in the neighborhood to see me facing that fear of being seen. It was something, and it allowed me to build a more robust physical practice. Reading a couple pages of a book turned into a reading habit that sticks with me. Sitting down and closing my eyes and just counting to 10 breaths was enough of a foundation to eventually become a much larger and incredibly rewarding and revealing meditation practice and relationship with spirit. But, don't let the accomplishments of others overwhelm. And this is something that was really hard for me to learn too. I had a tendency to always want to make these Herculean efforts at things, a la David Goggins, and doing just, mind-blowing things, running 125 miles through Death Valley. And start from where you are and let the little steps. I am a firm believer in my experience, my life, my own practice, that consistency trumps intensity every time. And whatever you can do and sustain, and sure, push yourself, but
sustained intensity trumps both.
Yeah. And if it takes you a minute to get there, it's okay, but you start. And so you have to continually too, especially when it's hard, when you don't want to get up, when you don't want to do it, you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I starting an angle practice? And then drilling deeper and deeper into it. Maybe in the beginning, you're say going back to school to get another degree, and you're thinking to yourself, why do I want to put in all the effort to learn all these things and go back and do this? Why do I want to pay the tuition and go through the process of application and financial aid and the whole thing? Why do I want to sit in a class and study and do all this? Well, maybe it's to get out of debt. I want to be able to pay my bills. So I need a better job. So I'm going to get out of debt. Why do you want to get out of debt? Because debt makes one a slave. Why do you not want to be a slave? Because freedom is a value. For some, it may be the highest value, but the process of drilling down and continuing asking yourself why, and then why that, and then why that, eventually you're going to land on something that is a core value, a guiding principle that is going to motivate practice and growth and transformation, that's going to fuel you in those moments of doubt when, say, you are David Goggins on a 100-mile run and you don't want to take another step, your body's given out, and what's going to push you through to do it anyway? You can recall those values that you have already done the work of digging down to find. And a bonus, when you make it to those moments, you'll often find new ones.
Yeah.
New values, new moments. The inspiration can really pour through in those challenging times.
Yeah, and then I've been in financial debt. I'm not now. That feels really good. But there's a karmic debt too. There's a soul debt. What are we? What are we here to achieve and to give and to accomplish? There's, we talk about integral. There's your body, there's your interiors, and then there's your relational self, and then the rest of the world. Well, sometimes we have, it seems that we have, callings and gifts to give, that if we don't give, it is like debt. And when I was a little kid, I must have been, I don't know, 6 or 7, 8. I think I was living in Mexico City at the time. I had this dream where I saw these gold coins. Like I was kind of floating in this white void, and they just went up forever as far as I could see, and they went down. And then all these professionals started showing up, like doctors and lawyers, or what little kids thought of as professionals, and nurses, and they were looking, that's your debt. That's your debt to society. And I was like, oh my God. And I would look up and down. Then I'd see myself in the dream, in front of this big dark pit with all this kind of gory, awful stuff in it. And I'd wake up completely freaked out, So there was like, I was just a little kid, yet I had this feeling that there was this really powerful debt that I had to pay off. I was like, what the hell? I'm a kid, what is that? And all these like educated, authority figure adults were telling me that I had to pay this off. And so I felt really burdened by it. But I still, I've worked with that dream over the years. And one of the interpretations that came to me is like, that stuff is not my debt. That's what I have to give. Like there's almost an infinity in each of us of gold, creativity, of goodness that we can give. And it takes a lot of searching and questing to find out what that is. It's not easy to find your path. Maybe some people it is, they're just born with it and they grow into it. With me, it certainly wasn't so. I just had whatever I had. I wanted to be a good soldier. And after I got out of the Army, I went to university. I wanted to be a good student because I was like, I hadn't gone to high school. Well, partially finished ninth grade, but so I had to really work hard to keep up with all these other people that were going to school, and I just didn't want to fail. But I had this idea that perhaps there was something important for me to do in my life. And even though I didn't know what it was, I was going to live my life as if. So for the most part, that's really what kind of kept me on track. Yeah, I'll learn, I'll study hard, I'll read the good books, I'll listen to the wise ones, and I'll ask a lot of questions, and I'll sit in the front row and take copious notes and just try to figure it out, and that kind of get me going. And I wasn't like, I was going to, they flunked me out of typing school at a junior college one time. The teacher said, "You suck. You just never get this." So anyway, in the Army, later on, being an investigator, I had to learn how to type my reports, and I was like, oh my God. But yeah, I didn't think I could sit in a cubicle or have that kind of intelligence to do what a lot of people would do, work for a corporation or something like that. And so what the hell am I supposed to do? And so that took me through a lot of interesting adventures. And it wasn't until, then for a while, Pam, my wife, and I, we left the Bay Area where we went to grad school in San Francisco, and moved out to southern Utah and became involved. Well, first of all, we were running around the wilderness for about 6 months. We had a storage locker and this old Beverly Hillbillies type four-wheel drive pickup truck that we bought, and store our stuff in a storage place in Moab. So we'd go out and run around the canyons for a few weeks and come back and, take showers and get a hot meal and load up the pickup with stuff and go back out. And
that's wild, John. That must have been quite an experience.
That was great. Yeah, it was awesome. And, the southern Utah is just so incredible, and I was always just like, God, when I go around this bend in the canyon, what glories are going to be revealed, this land of immense country and mountains and caves and, just all of this stuff that would just continually reveal itself to me. And that's when I started vision questing. I think I read a book on vision questing. I read about it somewhere. And I would just go out and do prayer fasts, find a cave or find a ledge and do it, and years later I realized, wow, most people, when they go on a vision quest, they actually have some support team, people that help them process the vision, that make sure they're okay, that, help them. And I'm like, oh, really? You can do that? That's a good idea. And anyway, I didn't, but I did get serious hints about what I was supposed to be doing. Something about, the wolf is an animal that's shown up multiple times in very strange ways in my life. And, then I read about what is a mythic, or what is a Native American, hit on what the wolf is. And that kind of informed me, and okay, there's something going here, and a sense of some kind of inner direction that the universe was collaborating or guiding my stumbling feet towards some path. And then we found these nascent wilderness programs that were just getting rolling. And, we've been trained as therapists, and hi, honey. My wife's bye. And so it was a natural fit. And all we really wanted to do was be outside anyway. So we were pretty much hired on the spot, and that became our career for a long time. And we started some programs and helped start others, and blah, blah, blah. And I was mainly out in the wilderness. That's where I felt the most at home. And then Pam became a therapist who would, go out and visit the students and do work with them and work with the families and blah, blah. So that was a powerful experience. And I felt like I was doing one of the things that I found out that I was actually pretty good at, besides telling people about Jesus and singing songs about Jesus. I was actually pretty good at it. But that didn't seem appropriate at that point. So, and then toward the end of that career, I was walking in the space station that we had, walking down one of the trails, and all of a sudden the it's like doing a podcast in Grand Central Station. But anyway, not so much. I just got this voice, intuitive voice says, "You're done." I went, "What? You're done. You've done this. Now you're done." And I was like, "Oh, great." Immediately fear came up. And by the way, I'm a 6 on the Enneagram. If you guys know about Enneagram, it's fear is the thing, so you try not to be scared, or you kind of get really big and tough, and study martial arts and, become a military policeman and, learn how to shoot and fight and all this stuff, which I did because the world's unsafe and you've got to be tough. Or you can just be a kind of a cowering 6. But anyway, I tried to be the tough guy 6. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then the idea of the book came out. I wrote an integral recovery book, and I wrote a couple of papers that were actually received really well and published. And then the boy said, "Write the book."
Can I just jump in and say that
Yeah,
even if you're not an addict, you guys are going to love, I mean, it's a really good book. John has a lot of good teaching in there, and one of the clearest explanations of integral theory in the shortest amount of time that I have ever come across. So if you're interested in any of this stuff we're talking about, it's a good read, even if addiction has never been part of your life.
yeah. And and so what is integral? I think I said it's holism with a map. It's like there's that intuitive thing that, everything's connected and blah, blah, blah. So we have to live holistically as if everything is connected to everything else, which is, it's a very true intuition, and definitely is an intuition that comes through spiritual practice and spiritual experiences, and psychedelic experiences are just, peak experiences. But in integral kind of shows you how to put the universe together, all being one, and how to work with that. So anyway, that was, and then I wasn't working for a while, and Pam was. She was the clinical director at this program we helped started, and so I took that opportunity to start writing. Man, full of just self-doubt. I am not a writer. I did a little writing in college, and I was a songwriter for a long time. But it's like, oh, book? Are you kidding? I wrote the papers, but maybe that's it. So started that process, and boy, it really just started coming through, and that just began to open up a whole new thing for me. And of course, I'd been working with addicts before in the wilderness and trying to teach people how to meditate when I wasn't much of a meditator myself, like on again, off again, gone again, meditator. And so then when I discovered brain entrainment technology by neural beats, it's like bing. And again, I had another big spiritual thing. And a lot of times it seems if you're going to be initiating something, you're bringing something into the world, you will have a big razzmatazz, big experience, because you're going to need it, because you're like the only person doing it at the time, and you're going to have something that's pretty affirming. It's like when Bill W., when he had his big, experience in the hospital, when he was down for the 10 count, and they thought he was never going to be able to leave. He had a big old swollen liver and was dying, and he had this spiritual experience, and he never drank again.
This is Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah,
and Dr. Bob. So
anyway, not our Dr. Bob.
No, that's another doctor. In fact, he was trying to call me as we were sitting here. So anyway, so I had this big thing, and wow, this is really important stuff. Maybe I can teach people how to meditate using this technology. So I had a big opening, and then I started processing and releasing layer after layer of trauma that had kept me struggling with depression for years, and went on for about 9 months. And then, as I meditated more and more and became a very dedicated, I was meditating an hour, 2 hours a day, I started getting a sense of the kind of motivation, or no, the directional voice started emerging from my practice, this wisdom thing that we can tap into. So that has kind of been guided my path. And I know now, even when I'm having a bad day or not feeling totally in touch with that, I know if I take the time and I sit down and I go inside and I do that kind of, for me, it's prayer. It's not oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? But it's like shutting up and focusing on my spiritual center and stilling my mind and all my stuff so that I can just be in that presence. And many times, besides just a present, there will be, marching orders, what I'm supposed to be doing and the direction I'm supposed to be taking, even pretty specific stuff, as well as kind of the tactical. I mean, the larger picture comes through. So,
I mean, that's definitely been a theme throughout the course of your life, John, is listening, exploration and listening for visions, and then having the courage to trust them and face that fear. That guided you from being in the wilderness and having these altered state experiences where you're more open to that kind of guidance and can really get in tune with hearing that message. That most of our lives are so cluttered these days with notifications and emails and tweets and bings and boops that we don't make space to hear that. And when you stop and you listen, whether it's on an extended thing like you initially did in the wilderness, whether it is you're laid out with depression, I mean, are you going to numb that watching reruns of Seinfeld, or are you going to sit there with it and see what it has to teach you? And you have really made a practice out of that has guided your life in some incredible directions. And then as a 6 on the Enneagram, especially having the courage to face those fears and those unknowns and lean into it. I mean, what a hell of a teacher fear is. It's like, this is the direction I'm afraid to go in, so let's go there. I mean, that's what the voice says. Let's do it. And first of all, I have a tremendous amount of respect for that. And second of all, I really would love to learn what you do to practically lean into that and face that when it confronts you on a daily basis. For example, John, you're a guy who's generally pretty introverted, but you do a lot of speaking on our podcasts and our meetings. You do a lot of public speaking these days. And I imagine as an introvert, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. It's a huge fear for most people. So how do you motivate yourself in the moment when you're feeling resistance, when you're feeling opposition? How do you push through that and move forward doing what you are guided and called to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, part of it is, and I think we both experienced doing these podcasts and stuff. And when I'm doing that, when I'm teaching, when I'm speaking, I really seem to get into these flow states, and it's like, wow, where did that come from? I mean, you really seem to be, like, get to a place where you feel like you're really channeling some kind of higher wisdom. The same thing with writing, right? So you start off, when writing gets good, it's like, oh, really? That's amazing. And Ken Wilber one time said, we were having a conversation about writing, and I love to talk to him about writing because he's an incredible writer. Man, I'm like, Bush League, minor, whatever. And he's like, he's like the Tom Brady of important books or something. And I'm saying, well, but anyway, he knows about writing, and he says, I don't write to tell people what I know. I write to learn what I don't know. So when you engage with it really happens. And there's an aftertaste when we do what we're supposed to be doing, that we feel good. There's these moments of, you've self-transcended in some sense, or stuff has come through you that has helped people and blessed people. And I was on a podcast the other day, and I talking about, what's missing in Western medicine. I mean, it doesn't take a great genius to figure that out. But anyway, I was talking about it, and the guy that was interviewing was a doctor, and he was asking me how to fix the medical profession. I was like, oh, really? So, but it came through, and it was just really, really one of those moments. And afterwards, it's like, wow, it's like God can even use a donkey, right, to speak. I mean, it can come through us if we set ourselves up. So, yeah, and I'm kind of fearless with the speaking thing anymore. And as you know, we don't do any prep. Like, he was asking me, okay, you need to do an intro. Have you thought about it? And then my answer is, are you kidding?
Have you ever met me, Doug? Have you ever worked with me before?
and it doesn't mean that I don't fill my heart and mind, with what subject that we're going to talk about. But when it comes to delivery, it's like, it would be like me playing the blues and going, have you really thought about the lead you're going to play when you go into The Thrill Is Gone? Well, of course not.
Yeah.
It's not what the blues is about to me. And I hate just learning, okay, I'm going to play this lead just like they did in Hotel California, which is a fantastic lead, by the way. I love listening to it, but I'm not going to just copy it because it's just not what I do. I'm very kind of spontaneous. So anyway, yeah. So I am an introvert, and I tend to isolate and spend a lot of time by myself. And in grad school, they told us there's a spectrum, and I found this very useful, whether you're introvert or extrovert, right? And the introvert over here, complete introvert, it's this way. And the introvert tends to get refilled and get their juice by being alone. And the extrovert just wants to be with peeps, right? That's how they get jazzed. And a lot of us are, somewhere on that spectrum, or right in the, some of us maybe are totally balanced. We need alone time. And this time I tend much more toward the introversion, but I do get really blessed when I hang out with people, and I have to get, John, just come on, man. And Carl Jung said that God comes through the how did he put it? The weaker aspects of ourselves. So if you're an introvert, you'll probably make some of your big breakthroughs in relationships with people, and the big people person, the extrovert, will have their breakthroughs in the silence of their, with the part that really scares them and bothers them. So I have to push myself into that, and then you just kind of know. You just know when that flow is happening, that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's it's humbling. You're filled with gratitude, and okay, yeah, I'm okay with the universe right now. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's a great feeling.
You talk about getting into these flow states and really leaning that way. You don't plan the solo you're going to play before you get out there and do it. And I found that's, whether you're writing, whether you're speaking, whether you're doing anything, you plan too much and you can get in your own way, or at least that's a big problem that I have had in the past, is learning how to let go and get out of my head and just show up and trust it in the moment. Allow myself to write, allow myself to play, allow myself to speak, allow myself to, and this has been a huge one for me, being also very, very introverted, is allowing myself to be seen in the context of not just by the public, but in relationship, allowing people to really know me and allowing myself to show up and be authentic and be myself and let people see who I am, has been huge. But you can't plan that. You can't think too much about what notes you're going to play, or you lose the authenticity of the moment. I know I'm not going to name names here, but I can think of quite a few bands and musicians who, as soon as they started trying to write for what they thought their audience wanted, they lost the magic that made the early albums so good. Same can be said for a number of authors too. You can get into this sort of success trap when you do well in that vein, where you start doing things that you think are what people have wanted in the past, and it is not the authentic truth, the authentic message that you have to express, that you have to give, that shows up in that moment. Which is not to say that you don't have a general semblance of a plan, and I would like to explore something in this direction. I would like to mess around with these kind of riffs in this scale, but that doesn't mean I'm going to sit there and plan out every note ahead of time and get lost in it.
But the other point is that I practice my ass off, to become a better guitar player. And I learn the scales, and I learn the riffs, and I learn the notes, and I learn the songs and all that stuff. It's not like just get up there and go blah, 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 with an untuned guitar and that you don't know how to play. It takes a hell of a lot of discipline to get to the point where you have that kind of freedom, and I was thinking about, we're talking about, people say I'm a good speaker and blah, blah. And it's like, I was out when I was 14 preaching the gospel, to individuals in big groups, just until my early 20s. I was really engaged in talking and teaching and preaching and all of this stuff. And then later on, when I got into the therapeutic wilderness gig. I mean, we spent a lot of time, you know, teaching around the campfire and leading groups and teaching classes and so it's something that I just always kind of did, and thought that it was, you know, kind of natural. And that's what I was thinking. Oh, I just kind of, you know, I just tap into this thing and it goes okay. But then I realized, wow, I did spend a lot of time growing up just speaking to people um, and knowing, feeling what, you know, flow is like, you know, in my old days of preaching the gospel, you know, we get into these flow states. He said, it's like, oh, it's like you're in the spirit. Okay, the spirit's really coming through, you know, and it still pretty much feels like that when I'm really on, or when anybody's really on. It does feel something sacred and holy is going on. And I would say a flow state now instead of being, you know, in the spirit. But still, it's kind of that same experience, and it does seem to be a divine or almost a miraculous thing when it happens, you know.
They describe the flow state as having 4 characteristics, right? Of selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and sensory richness. And man, if that's not a spiritual experience, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And that's why musicians keep playing music, even though the lifestyle often sucks and is hard, and, you know, no money, and, you know, how do you make money now and you know, when you can have 1 million streams and make $1.50 or something, you know, I don't know if it's that extreme, but it's not much money. So how do you do that? And you stick with it. And why do we keep coming back to it? And with my music, I just got to the point and said, well, I'm not even worry about this being a business. This is yoga, you know, this is a spiritual practice for me. And especially the blues. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm so able to, I bought a little painting I found in an antique store the other day, and has this picture of this cool looking black dude with, it looks like it's a drawing. It looks like an ES-335 Gibson. But anyway, and the little scrawl on it says, as long as people have problems, the blues will always live, or something like that, you know. And so, yes.
So in other words, the blues is going away, you know, yesterday, because nobody has any problems anymore.
Yeah. And I'm just culturally appropriating the fuck out of the blues, you know. And I don't know, to me, it's imitation is the deepest form of admiration. And if you know, it's great stuff, and it's the roots of, you know, everything American music, you know, whether it's country and rock and roll and jazz and fusion and funk, everything goes back to that stuff, and I just adore it.
And John, you're not doing it because it's something you think is cool. It's coming from an authentic place within you. You know, you're really channeling your soul and your pain and everything else through it, and that's right. What's really important there.
Right. And I realize that I'll never, you know, I'm too old or whatever. I'll never be the best technical, you know, Satriani or, you know, some of these great guitarists, but man, I can play with real passion when it gets going, you know, and I'm not copying anything. It's just coming through me. And that is so awesome. You know, it's like, I feel when I'm in those zones after practicing my butt off all the time, that it feels like every nuance of my soul can just happen simultaneously. So I feel it, it plays it. And it's just like no fear of the neck or anything at that point. It just all comes through, and it's just terrific. And I do need to get out and play for people more. And I've been invited here to do that. So I'm in northern Louisiana at the moment, and this is kind of, you know, the home of the blues. This, you know, the Mississippi Delta, New Orleans, Louisiana, Texas, you know, then up to, of course, in Tennessee, and Memphis. And then, of course, it all moved to Chicago, and then bumped over to England, where a bunch of white boys had to teach us about the black music that us white folks were ignoring by and large. So anyway, it's been a wonderful story how it's evolved. And I just dig it, like being here.
And you can do it, and you can lean into that place because, as you said, you have practiced your ass off to get there. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean being the fastest technical player in the world, but that doesn't mean you didn't put the time in learning your way around those scales so that you can do things in them without thinking about them, and changing positions and doing string bends and hammer-ons and slides and whatever is calling you in that, whatever comes out of you in that moment, because you put in that work to practice. And I'll tell you, it sounds like it'd be boring as hell practicing your scales and practicing these tedious kind of technical exercises. But in my experience, if you do it right, you can get into a flow state doing that too.
Yes, and you can actually imagine, or it seems like I can feel my brain and these new synapses and, growing as I just repeat this riff over and over, this thing I'm learning, and just watching it from day to day get a little better. That's very satisfying. And once you learn the principles of deep practice, dedicated practice, even that becomes, a really, really good thing. You've kind of discovered the heart of practice and how it works, and then of course it gives you faith that you can tackle almost anything if you're willing to dedicate yourself to it, and it becomes because the joy of practice, the joy of transcending yourself and accomplishment becomes reinforcing, and it gets easier and easier. The more you practice, the easier it is to practice, because you just frickin' get it. And sometimes you don't want to do it, right? But so what? You're dedicated to this art form. And so you just pick up the damn guitar and you just work on it, and, integral practice, meditation, going to the gym. It's like, I don't have to really freak out about going to the gym anymore. I just do it, I just do it. It's just what I do. And I'm going to be driving back to Utah. And of course I've already got planned, to work out every morning, in the motel. I go up, get up and run Lucy around, my dog, and then I go to the gym, and then we hit the road, Yeah. So it starts off with fear, and it moves from fear ultimately into love, and passion. And playing the guitar, I can play really fast, man. I got some, and sometimes I'm playing scales and practice things, and it's like clunk, 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 clunk. Yeah. But I remember it was Sundance, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Paul Newman, Robert Redford, classic movie that came out when I was a kid. And my first girlfriend was in love with Robert Redford. So I never liked him very much for years because I was jealous. But anyway, there's this scene, they're down in South America and they're getting a job to be, bodyguards or to protect this guy's caravans or something from these banditos. And the guy, he gets his gun, he's ready to draw. And the guy says, look, no fancy shit. Just shoot it. The can. And so he goes, wham, misses it. Wham, miss. And the guy goes, okay. And he's turning away and says, can I move now? Sundance says this, Robert Redford. And he takes it, man, just makes this thing dance, right? This can. So that's what I feel sometimes, and it's like I do all the practices, but when it comes time, can I move now? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And just hit it, and it's like, it's kind of like making love, there's time to be really slow. And there's this time when the ecstasy's hitting, baby, you just go for it. It's really fast and wild and freaking crazy. And how you learn to play with those dynamics, capacity makes you a great player and a great lover. So it is truly about love and passion and eros, in the broadest sense of the word.
And that's a spiritual practice too. Absolutely. I'd love to explore that more in a future episode. But John, you're talking about all of these things, from playing the guitar to making love to going to the gym, and you describe it so poignantly, so beautifully, where it hits that place that practice becomes rewarding for its own sake. It becomes its own motivator when you can get to that place and do it and not worry so much about the outcome, because you're so there in the moment doing exactly what you need to be doing, that you're not thinking about how it's going to turn out and whether it's going to be okay. And that's when not only the best things happen, but that's when life feels the most rewarding too. I during the worst parts of my addiction, I had put my guitar away in the closet and I was not going to touch that thing. I felt like music was in some ways responsible for a lot of the trouble in my life. And that's a long story I don't want to get into. But the point is, I didn't practice for years and years and years, would not pick up my guitar. And at some point, just before my daughter was born, I remembered that I had always wanted to grow up in a musical family and have a musical family. And so as my wife is pregnant, I went and dug my guitar out of the closet and just started playing again. And the motivation was completely different. All of a sudden, I was no longer trying to build a career for myself as a musician or become some kind of producer or do anything. I was playing just for the sheer joy of it, because I wanted to, because it was fun, because it was something that I felt close to. And doing that changed everything. Not only did I improve faster than I ever had before, but I had a hell of a lot more fun doing it. And I rediscovered why music meant so much to me in the first place. And I think the same can be said of anything. Once you drop the external expectations and the baggages and allow the things that call you to be their own reward, then you continue, and then you have your reason to continue and to keep showing up.
You know, and then just back to music, we were at a conference a couple of years ago in near Palo Alto, the Trans Tech conference, and we were staying there. We had a big Airbnb, this wild place. I love that house. And Dr. Bob was there, who's a really good jazz drummer, very good. And I brought some guitars for both of us, and we just started playing. And immediately we just fell into a groove, and it was just brilliant. Because sometimes you get together musicians and it's just, it's just not happening. But immediately it was like, damn, just boom, the energy was there. And that's beautiful when the flow state can happen between people. It's not just an individual thing, but it becomes a group effort. That's why, bands and playing sports and all of this stuff is, and so the quest for self-transcendence is almost the quest for God, if you will, for ultimate meaning and purpose. And we can find that through our practices, whether it's guitar or speaking or writing or exercising or long distance running or tennis is another thing I'm obsessed about. And like I played last night with Pam, and now I finally, I taught myself, that is terrible, functional but terrible style. And there's a way to actually do a proper tennis serve. It's really hard. It's one of the hardest things in sports, I think. And you have the continental grip. In other words, you hold the edge of the tennis racket like a sword coming out from your hand. And so instead of, you would think you would hit it like this, but there's a wrist. So anyway, and that's the way to do it. And it has tremendous power. So I've been practicing that, and I started just doing that. Now it's this game from now on, I'm going to attempt to do a proper tennis serve. And I was had a pretty good dysfunctional, we'll call it a frying pan serve. And so Pam beat me 6-0 yesterday, the whole set. And I haven't been beat. I mean, she beats me, more than I would like, but never just skunked me. And it was because I was just determined I'm not going to go back to the easy serve that I know. I'm going to push until I get this, damn serve down, and then it's going to be Hannah bar the door. Pam's going to stop playing with me, or she's going to have to up her game to deal with it. Because when I get it, I really get it. I mean, it's a very powerful serve. So anyway, that's just the fun of this stuff, and just looking forward to and studying. And how am I going to? I'm hitting a plateau. How do I get to the next level? Whether it's in my meditation or my relationships or my writing or my professional role that I have. It just becomes, once we kind of find the things that we're doing, then it just begins to bring us back to ourselves and, bring us back to God, who is ultimately who we are, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the hardest times to stick with it, John, is that plateau where it seems like I'm doing the right things and nothing's happening. I'm doing the right things and nothing's happening. I'm not seeing the progress. I'm not seeing the changes. I'm not seeing the transformation that I hoped for. Why am I going to keep going? And so, right. And then all of a sudden an explosion happens, and you're way above and beyond. Your skills, your whatever it is that you're working towards, all of a sudden just transforms before your eyes. But you have to push through that moment of hopelessness when it doesn't seem like anything you're doing is making a difference. Trust that you're on the path and doing the right things, and as long as you're sticking with it, you'll get there. And trust and love come from that place.
Well, everybody, thank you so much, and hopefully, there's some help and inspirations. Certainly helps us The more I talk about what's important in my life and how I'm getting there, it reinforces my own commitment to do the work that I need to do and be the person I need to be and take responsibility for it and not make excuses. So anyway, I love you guys, and thank you so much. And we'll be back next time. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate you.